And good afternoon. My name is John with PineTree.net, and I have the distinct pleasure to be here with Dr. Bill Durston. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Now, you're running for Congress again for covers our district. This is your second run. So now I know that this district is an odd-shaped district.
Yeah.
You know, with primary part of it in the Sacramento metro region, plus our little Calaveras County up here. For those people or viewers in our county that are not really familiar with some of the other processes, give us a couple-minute rundown on Dr. Durston. How you got?
Sure.
Yeah.
How I got into this.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm an emergency doctor.
Okay.
I'm also a Vietnam veteran.
Got it.
I volunteered for the Marines after high school, which was the height of the Vietnam War, and I served with the Marines 3rd Force Recon Company. So I got a taste for what war was like.
Yeah.
And when I became an emergency physician, I joined an organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Okay.
It was formed back in the 60s in response to the threat of nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States when we were being asked to build bomb shelters in our backyard.
Right.
You're not old enough to remember that, but
I am. I'm kind of, yeah.
Physicians for Social Responsibility said a bomb shelter in your backyard is not going to do you any good in case of a nuclear war.
Right.
And so physicians in the United States actually got together, physicians in the Soviet Union formed International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War.
Okay.
That helped talk some sense into governments and got some of the limited nuclear treaties that we have now, and actually won the Nobel Peace Prize for that in 1985.
Oh, nice.
So with Physicians for Social Responsibility, after September 11th and after all the saber rattling about the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, I helped reform the Sacramento chapter and became the president of the Sacramento chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility. And we spoke out against the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
And so that's how people knew of me. And in 2006, some people came and asked me if I'd run for Congress because it looked like nobody was going to run against the incumbent.
Right.
He was one of these many congressmen who never served in the military himself, but seems to have no qualms about sending others to war. And initially I told them no, because I'd never done anything like this. But I said, well, but I'll help you find somebody who will run.
Sure.
And I could not find anybody who would run. And I decided at a time like this in our nation's history, it's unacceptable to let someone like the incumbent run unopposed. So we got into the race late on very short notice in 2006. I think ran a credible campaign, even though we came up short. Waited to see what would happen, with the new Congress, and some things I think were good, but the continued funding of the war, many of us felt disappointed about that. And again, I tried to find someone else to run in 2008.
Right.
In fact, one of your county supervisors, Steve Walensky, and I had a candidates debate. I debated why he'd be a better candidate, and he debated why I'd be a better candidate. So I lost the debate.
So you had to run.
Here I am running.
Yeah, there you go. Is a little bit before we get into some of the other things last little bit on the war portion of it is with the. I guess what is your take on how the surge, for a lack of a better term, is that because in the last few months, just from looking at it from the outside, it seems in a strange way there may actually be some middle ground on Iraq now as far as setting some timetables on exit and things like that. Is that something that you see? I guess the last thing is how would you think on now? Let's say you're elected now as going forward the next couple years. How do you see Iraq, and what would your solution be on the Iraq question on that?
If we go back to the beginning,
right.
That war was started on false pretenses.
That's
from the point of view of a Vietnam veteran.
Understood.
To see our soldiers being put in the same type of situation that we were put in Vietnam, which was also started under false pretenses, not being able to distinguish friend from foe, these agonizing decisions, now with more than 4,000 U.S. servicemen, servicewomen killed, 60,000 injured, spending $200,000 a minute on that war and occupation. It was clearly started on false pretenses. It has nothing to do with fighting terrorism. Iraq had nothing to do with the September 11th terrorist attacks. And the invasion and occupation has turned that country into a virtual terrorist breeding ground, which is predictable. General David Petraeus himself said in March of 2007 before the surge. There's no military solution to a problem like that in Iraq. And I believe that's a true statement. Conventional military force has never been effective in combating terrorism and never will be. As far as the effectiveness of the surge goes, there were a lot of things happening at the same time.
Right.
The Muqtada al-Sadr
Right.
declared basically a truce, a ceasefire, and the Mahdi army basically laid back at the time of the, coincidentally, with the surge. We started re-employing the Sunnis who had worked for Saddam Hussein, and that was a big mistake in the beginning.
To disband that whole army to begin with, huh?
Because then you had all of these people suddenly out of work, armed, angry. So we started re-employing them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things happened together, and to credit the decrease in violence all to the surge is not consistent with all the things that are happening. And even if you do say, well, the surge was effective,
Right.
it was effective in reducing levels of violence back to levels in March of 2004. We invaded in March of 2003.
Right.
We should have never invaded in the first place. I will support a prompt, orderly, but prompt and complete withdrawal of U.S. troops. Stop wasting vast amounts of money and vast amounts
Right.
of manpower
Right.
On a situation which our leading general has said, cannot be solved by military force. And work toward a truly international peacekeeping force, helping rebuild a stable
Right.
economy there.
And I didn't mean to dig. I mean, because I know we could spend the whole half hour.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to
Exactly.
swerve in that. What
No, it's great.
yeah, and I just wanted to preface that is getting how the thing started. That's outside of. I mean, we can't. Our
That's
little
water under the
time
bridge.
little thing is. Yeah, we probably didn't do
Right.
that one. But I was just
Yep.
trying is going forward. This election cycle post, because I think even the last. I mean, what are we looking? What some of the published ones now? 2011. I think that may be I mean, that's even from the Iraqi side now saying that they would looking at. But that's still
Yes.
quite a ways out. But I mean, it's
Yes.
a long ways from
Or
now.
sooner.
But,
And
yeah.
it looks like the Iraqi government is probably going to be the stimulus to say, well, thank
Time
you
to
very
go.
much. Now it's time for you to
Right.
go.
Right.
And, we can call it a victory if we want.
Right.
But I think, my goodness, the number of people killed on all sides, the amount of money spent to say that this is a victory. It's a very, very costly one.
And that'll be debated for the next probably 100 years.
Could well be, exactly, just like Vietnam.
Yeah.
Still being debated.
Yeah.
Yep. The main thing I'll say, as a combat veteran, I would never send anybody else to fight in a war that I would not fight in myself.
Understood.
My opponent avoided military service during Vietnam, yet he was pro-Vietnam War. Seems to have no qualms about sending other people to do it.
Understood. And I wanted to say thank you for your service. I know that people that have served. I mean, you see a side of things that those of us that haven't will never see, and I think that gives you a credibility on it that rightfully so, that you've earned.
Well, thank you.
And I guess on to a little lighter topics. Well,
Good.
maybe lighter. The economy.
Right.
Now, on as you see, now I guess whether it's up to whether it fits the technical legal description or not, for all intents and purposes, we're in a recession. What do you see the role of the government, Congress, and specifically going forward on trying to help us get out of this mess? I mean, where do you think things should go?
It's a complex situation.
Right.
But there are many things that the government can do to help stimulate local economies.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it relates back to war in many ways. If we're spending $200,000 a minute in Iraq, every time that somebody in Calaveras County has said, we can't, there's no federal money to help with your fire department,
Right.
your police department, with your schools, with your hospitals, with your roads, think, my goodness, and we're wasting all this other money overseas in war. Even before Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States was spending as much on its military as the next 10 militarized countries of the world combined.
Wow.
And I don't think that could be construed as defense. As a combat veteran,
Right.
yes,
Right.
I favor strong defense. But, when President Dwight Eisenhower stepped down after his second term in 1960, and he was the supreme Allied commander in World War II in
Mm-hmm.
Europe, he warned us about the potentially disastrous influence of the military-industrial complex on our democracy.
Right.
And what we have now is a tremendous amount of money basically going to war profiteering. No country in the history of the world has ever been able to devote massive amounts of manpower, human power, and
Right.
money to war in preparation for it without its own economy crumbling and without the whole infrastructure crumbling. We need to bring back that manpower and those financial resources to rebuild our own economy at every level.
Well, I guess a little bit of an expansion on that then, I guess it takes a little bit back to the military side of it, is what in your view is the appropriate, not percentage-wise, but how do you think the military side of our our place in the world now? I mean, where does the military fit in that? I mean, what is the appropriate role?
The military, conventional military force is effective in combating a conventional military threat.
Which we may not see normally,
We certainly hope not.
Right. Right.
And, go into the issue of nuclear weapons, which I talked about in the formation of Physicians for Social Responsibility. The United States and the Soviet Union still have thousands of nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. The whole idea...
Maybe more of a hair trigger with the Georgia stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. And as tensions
Right.
increase, we are seeing, reemergence of a new Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
This whole anti-ballistic missile system, this so-called missile shield, in test of this system, when they know when the incoming missile is going to be launched, sometimes even when it's got a homing beacon on it,
Mm-hmm.
in perfect weather conditions,
Mm-hmm.
the missile system, anti-ballistic missile system is effective about half the time in
Right.
shooting down the single incoming
Right.
target.
Right.
Well, that can easily be overcome by shooting multiple decoys. Now the Soviet Union, or Russia, has developed missiles that go on curving
Mhm.
paths and so on. So this type of spending is not effective in making us safer. It's not effective in shooting down incoming ballistic missiles. It is effective in regenerating an arms race and a new Cold War. We need enough, military to combat a conventional military attack. We need, and hopefully that'll never happen if we
Right.
use diplomacy to build better relations. The Olympics are a great example. I mean, China is certainly far less than perfect in terms of human rights.
Right.
But just the interchange, people visiting each other,
Sure.
competing, one person wins, one person loses, they shake hands
Right.
At the end of it. That's how we can work towards security, not by building up arms
Okay.
and military treaties.
Now, I guess on the economic question, then, do you think of some of the things as if our spending is reduced on the military side of the equation, that the economy will just grow our way out of this, or is that, without an oversimplification, is that
There's all kinds of ways the federal
Okay.
government can help redirect that money to more
Right.
constructive uses. Here in Calaveras County, there are issues regarding water.
Right.
We have the 3 large rivers up here
Mhm.
which provide water for
Mhm.
everybody else downstream. Some of those rivers, particularly the Calaveras River, are in trouble. Money can be redirected toward helping protect these water resources. Obviously, roads, schools,
Right.
hospitals,
Yeah.
clinics. My opponent voted against the state children's health insurance program, against renewing, expanding that to cover children of low-income families. Well, we can expand things like that, provide better health care for people, and at the same time provide more jobs for people. One example, your county supervisor, Steve Walensky, developed this CHIPS program.
right? The CHIPS program, yeah.
And that's a great idea.
Mhm.
It helps reduce fire risk by taking this small caliber wood
Right.
and clearing it out, and then
Mhm.
also converting it into usable material, such as pellets. Steve Walensky got some federal grant money for projects like that.
Right.
There are unlimited number of areas.
Yeah.
Renewable energy
Mhm.
resources. Investing in that, developing a new industry so we can be the leaders in renewable energy. And you've got plenty of wind, and you've got plenty of sun
Right.
up here. All kinds of ways that we can redirect money that we're wasting on war and preparation for war instead for the betterment of our communities, betterment of our society.
I guess as one little tiny segue on that, and is that as a rural county, in some ways, our problems aren't unique, but what types of investments? Maybe this is an unfair question because you haven't had a chance to think on this one, but what types of economic development do you see that fits in a rural? I mean, if we're not going to get a division of HP, so to speak, like some of the, like some of the road. I mean, with lack of a better term, a lot of the Sacramento metro area, you have some of the satellite. We're probably not going to get that up here. But I mean, where do you see? Because this is a county that needs jobs. This is a county where you have your public sector jobs, your county government and education sectors is really by default some of the largest employers. I mean, we need some real private sector investments to kind of balance the balance sheet, so to speak. Is for rural counties, where does that come from? And where do you think that, I mean, for...
And that is really the million-dollar question.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to...
No, and I don't
what
have...
made some of it here, and they may be interested. Yeah.
Exactly, and I won't claim to have all the solution, but I will... one of the parts about being an emergency doctor is being a good listener.
Right.
And actually, I think that's the most important part about being a good emergency doctor. I think the same is true in being a good congressman, listening to what people's needs are. But my background, I grew up in the Santa Clara Valley, San Jose area, before it became the Silicon Valley.
Right.
And when I was growing up there, it was all orchards. It was paradise, the blossoms and everything. And then during my lifetime, I've seen it largely paved over. You know, there was an economic boom there, particularly during the computer boom.
There was a cost on the other side of it as well. Huh?
There is a cost.
Yeah.
I mean, people could not afford to even live there anymore. The people who were providing the services, the police and the fire, and so on, it got so expensive. So how to get that balance between having a healthy economy and yet still, preserving the beautiful natural landscape that you have in Calaveras County? I don't have all the answers to that.
Yeah.
But I want to work with people on that, and we have to, in some way, find a way to reward, with monetary rewards, good land stewardship. Not just, pay for development, but have government bring back money to those counties like Calaveras County that are taking care of the water that we all depend on, the good land stewardship, keeping the air clean.
And this is something where I've talked about this in our little local area and stuff as well, but I think going forward it bears, I don't know if there's any way that the federal government could help in this regard. Is one of the things is, like, for example, my wife and I, we run a small business that is primarily virtual in the fact that it really doesn't need an office, it doesn't need, but the other and plus side of that is it really doesn't impact infrastructure in any way, as some of the brick and mortar. And I think as our economy moves towards more of an online, for example, I guess online in a different word, but also a screen-based economy. For example, how many people are working in the Sacramento metro area that could be basically doing it from home if we could figure out how to manage those people better? I mean, what impacts would that have on traffic, resources? And I guess where I was getting for a rural county is the one thing I think the way the federal government could really help us, or is create incentives for telecoms to basically, because if we had ubiquitous broadband in a very rural nature, there's ways of making incomes and that. I mean, some guy if he can make six figures sitting in his PJs at home, I mean, that's pretty efficient use of resources as far as impacts on infrastructure, water. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just saying is that. But also think it's that type of sector. If there's some way the federal government could help with that, it's a very. I mean, I think that's something that could cut across party lines as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's efficient,
and that's what the U.S. representative should do. Should work with people with ideas like that and find ways that the federal government and our collective taxpayers' money can be used to stimulate real progress. And in the case you're describing, an energy-efficient telecommuting type of thing, cut down on use of renewable resources, save resources, and also provide the service that you're providing, which is to educate people. And particularly in my own situation, educate people on the important things they need to know to make a logical choice to vote in their own best interest in this congressional race.
I know we kind of swerved off on some of the topics that I was, but what is there some things that you would like to stress and think that is coming towards closer to November that really the points that people should really consider?
Being an emergency doctor, healthcare, of course, is
Right.
a huge issue for me. It's always been my philosophy that access to necessary medical care is a basic human right, not a privilege based on your ability to pay. And that's the way I've always practiced medicine. And that's the way most other industrialized Western countries of the world look at it.
Right.
The United States is the only industrialized Western country that doesn't have some form of universal health care. And people say, well, universal health care would be nice, but how do you pay for it? And the fact is we're already paying for it. As a country, we pay twice as much per capita for health care as the average of those other countries in which everybody is covered.
Yeah.
The problem is we have for-profit health insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies making enormous amounts of money. Our for-profit health insurance industry, the main motivation is to avoid insuring anybody who's
Right.
sick or likely to become
Right.
sick. And so we have health care distributed according to where it's most profitable, not where it's most needed. And of course, rural counties like Calaveras feel the pain of that
Sure.
system
Sure.
to a great extent. You don't have the specialists you need. You have to go down to the valley to get specialist care. Even for veterans, they have to go to certain facilities. And here again, the government has a primary role. And this, I think, is so symbolic of the problem for government. We don't have government of, by, and for the people. We've got government of, by, and for special interests.
Okay.
If you look at my opponent, he gets money from the for-profit health insurance companies, from the for-profit pharmaceutical companies. He votes against expanding the state children's health insurance program to cover children of low-income families. He votes against requiring the Secretary of Health and Human Services to negotiate lower prescription drug costs. It's shameful, really, our healthcare system. And that's one of the big issues for me, is to work toward universal access to necessary medical care for everybody. And really in the small counties like this, to make sure you have the health care you need out here.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree. I mean, the healthcare system in the U.S. probably catching people in the unguarded moments on both sides of the political fence. It's broken. It's without a question, it's broken. So I guess, what does fixing it look like? I mean, what is stating is okay? It's a given. It's broken.
Sure.
Like, okay, where do we go from here? I mean,
Sure.
What do you think the solution looks like?
Yep. The end solution is something like State Senator Sheila Kuehl envisions in SB 840. She proposes a single-payer healthcare system that wouldn't change the way healthcare is delivered, but it would change the way it's financed. So instead of paying to all these private insurance companies, the money would go to a government health commission that then would make decisions based on medical need, not on profit. At the federal level, there's a bill called H.R. 676, Medicare for All. People talk about government-run healthcare as being a bad thing. Well, Medicare is a very effective system. It's got a low overhead compared to the private health insurance industry. It cares for the oldest, sickest portion of our population.
Right.
So the idea is, well, it's doing darn well for the oldest, sickest group. Let's just expand it for everybody. So that would be an ultimate solution. We probably will have to go in incremental steps to get to this type of system. One idea would be just, people have this concern about government-run healthcare. One idea would be to set up a voluntary government healthcare system, either at the state or the federal level, and give the option.
So you opt in voluntarily.
You opt in voluntarily, or an employer can opt in voluntarily, and prove that a government-run system, by using its purchasing power to leverage down cost, by limiting the for-profit motive, by limiting all the administrative redundancy, can provide more comprehensive health care benefits for lower premiums.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you spending time with us, and appreciate including our little media outlet as part of your trip through this area. And
it's a pleasure.
And good luck towards November. And if you guys hold a candidates night in this area, we'll try to get there.
We would love to have a debate with our opponent. He's shied away from debates. He's afraid to debate, but we would love to do that. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service to the community.
Thank you very much.